Okay. I believe their YouTube comes in. I don't see a video for it. Okay, that scared me for a second. Not scared as in intrepidation, but there we go. And that's Facebook. Hey, great to see everybody this morning as we're on another Facebook Live. This has been traditionally a questions and answers, and I certainly won't be just getting rid of that. I'm not ever going to ignore a question. I guess you should never say never. I can't think of a reason I would ignore a question that you would throw out on comments or something. But what we're focusing on is making a Bible lesson. I prefaced this saying that I don't believe that I'm any kind of authority on making Bible lessons. I'm doing this as much to see maybe what you do too, that I might check out in making a lesson, and to share what it is that I do as I'm attempting to make biblical lessons. And when I say biblical lessons, I don't mean something where the Bible is just a topic in it and we use it as a springboard to talk about whatever, but a lesson that seeks to teach what it is that God teaches in His Word as we're examining it. And so I wanted to do a brief summary of what we talked about last time. If you missed it, you didn't miss a lot because we got disconnected, and I'll be getting us caught up to where we were, and we'll be beginning the study of this topic, Angels in Modern Times. And this lesson can be something that's used for you and your personal study and development, which anybody who's teaching a lesson should first learn something that way. Or it could be used, then in addition, I should say, it could be used to teach others in a Bible class setting, in a personal study setting, your family, or preaching a lesson. So I wanted this to be something accessible to everybody. You don't have to be, don't have to be a preacher in order to be able to learn from how to develop a Bible lesson. It will also help you listen to preaching better, because you will be in a spot to be able to ascertain how someone might have put together a point that they didn't necessarily show, because that's not what you do when you're preaching. You don't necessarily pull back the curtain and say, this is how I came to this point every time. And in fact, whenever we're looking at this lesson, we'll see the ideal way to build any Bible lesson is to know and incorporate the whole Bible. But that's somewhat like Carl Sagan's quote, if you want to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. Well, we don't have to go back that far, and nobody is ever going to be able to make an apple pie again. But what he was saying and what we see with Bible context is for us to adequately portray accurately what it is that we're teaching, we need to take the Bible into consideration. Are we always going to be able to find more context? Sure. We shouldn't hyper-contextualize to a point where we're trying to excuse try to make the excuse we can't know anything, but we also don't want to just manipulate and take things out of context to mean what we want them to mean. And so we'll be covering that balance as we look at it too. And we're looking at this topic again, angels in modern times. If this were a text that we were examining, what I would say is where we'd start is gathering the information, which is what we'll do today. But gathering the information about a text, what I would do is I would become very familiar with that text, whether it's a section of verses or a book. I'd read it several times, those verses, that chapter, the book surrounding it, how that book fits regarding the audience to which it was delivered and the time that it was given, how it fits in the dispensation in which it was written, and how it fits in the whole Bible. And you wouldn't necessarily cover every aspect of that in your lesson, but looking at that, you say, okay, then I can pinpoint, or I can narrow down, this is how the author meant this, if it is possible to do that with that section. And therefore, this is how it applies for me today. With this topic, this is a topical lesson, Angels in Modern Times. What our information gathering looks like is it's broader at first. It looked like I started, with the verse and the chapter, and I broadened whenever we were looking at a text. This one seems it's broader at first. It's looking at what does the Bible say about angels, and it's going to then narrow it down into characteristics and definitions and things. So as such, it somewhat is going to become a word study on angels. And then that word study on angels is going to be used to understand better what we can know about angels in modern times. Because as we look at it, we see that anything that is spiritual can't be sensed by us. We have to be informed about it by that or he who is spiritual, who can tell us about it. And that would be God through Scripture. If that's not something that you believe, that's something that we could talk about for sure. But we're going to take that as an assumption in approaching this, that we're looking at the Bible as the authority on those things that we couldn't otherwise know unless God had revealed them to us. That's what we're going to do. So looking at that, we ended last time talking about a range of references from the most objective to the least, or most subjective to the most subjective. And when I'm talking about objective, if it's not something that you're familiar with, I'm talking about something that is immovable. It's a standard by which you can measure things. You can make a comparison. You can know it's truth. It's accurate. Subjective is dependent upon individuals' perspectives. It is subject to change. And so when we're looking at sources, and we're not just making an opinion piece. What do people say about this? That would be a whole other topic. And I don't typically just do pieces on what do people say about angels. I'm sorry, I had my comments blocked. Hey, Miss Debbie. Hey, AJ, good to see you. And so I start over here on the most subjective, because when we're looking at spiritual truths and pleasing God, what we want to say is, what does God say about it? If anything, what can I know? And so the sources that we use, we want to somewhat recognize where they are on that scale. Not that there'll never be a place for these subjective ones. I mentioned at the beginning of last time that we might want to hear what some prevailing opinions are today, so that we can give sort of an introduction and contrast. Here are some experiences that people have said that they have. But that would be on this extreme of the subjectivity. Individuals, not demonstrable, not based out of Scripture. So we're looking over back at the objective, and we see that this would be the most subjective part. It'd be all the way over here. This is our standard and authority, the Bible. And if we want to be very, very specific, somebody might say, well, ideally you could read the Greek and Hebrew in their original languages, and that would be, well, great. And the Bible you have by means of translation. There we go. By means of translation, does have some interpretation in it. However, the 2-second version of my philosophy about Bible translations is, if we studied enough for it to be a problem, it wouldn't be a problem. The Bible would have, that was the 2 seconds. The Bible has plenty of criteria in it, plenty of evidence in it that shows how the other things fit. And so if we have a translation issue, that comes to bear, and we can understand it. Jesus used the Septuagint, not a great translation, and he never had to make all these caveats about it to say, well, it's not really a great translation. It's sort of more of a paraphrase, and they leave this part out or whatever. He just quotes it, and so we see somewhat of an example there. So the Bible here, this is our objective standard, and as we look at other tools and things, we're going to see their uses. Now, again, if this were a text, we would go right to the Bible and read that text. Since this is a topic, unless you have an encyclopedic knowledge, an exhaustive knowledge of all the verses in the Bible where that topic occurs, where you will likely start is something that provides that in a tool, and we'll look at that in a minute. But say you don't have anything but your Bible. Oh no. Well, that's great. That's fine. Can you go to some verses that you think of that talk about this topic? And so what you might do is you think of the verses that you can remember, and you might say, well, I remember there's Jacob, and he saw angels, or I remember he was the Mahanaim, where there was the camp of the two, or the place of the two camps. You could go to the New Testament and say, I remember angels here, they administered to Jesus, or at the resurrection, you rolled back the stone. And you can go to those places and see what it is that you learn. And you'll find already, if we just had those verses, we would see some characteristics about angels that are contradictory to common beliefs and depictions of angels today. That's something to consider. So I don't want you to feel like, oh, I don't have that book, or I don't have a computer that has this on it. If you're watching me, you have access to some kind of electronic device. So I want to encourage you to avail yourself of that. But I wanted to say, what you know of the Bible right now is enough to begin. And then if you say, I can't even begin to find a place, then start reading. Start reading Scripture, because that's where the answer is if you want to know about angels. And we look at this today and we say that's a big book. If you hear writings about from people who were discussing Bible topics, it was something that 100 and more years ago they would say, just read the New Testament and think about this. No, we haven't said that for a while, but that would be a way to study it. Read the Bible and think about and keep in mind angels, these spiritual beings of God as we're looking at them. And as the question was worded, I'm assuming we're talking about these spiritual beings, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. So let's move on to some other tools. I'll briefly go through this objectivity-subjectivity scale when we're looking at it, and then we'll go to our first tool. But you see behind me some of our options, and I have to my. So it's my right, your left. Right here, our concordances. And when we're looking at our concordances, I'm mirror image, so yes, I am. Here we go. We look at our concordances, and I would put these as very close to objective, because what they are is they're listing all the words that occur. Well, here's a lexicon. Let me put that over here. I'll say concordance. I apologize. Okay, Strong's Analytical Concordance. Aside from being great at pressing flowers, this lists most words in the Bible alphabetically. I say that because then you've got a and the, and depending on the concordance that you have, it might not have those at all. And it's very nice. Many people only use Strong's in its most limited capacity, and that is, there's a Bible verse that says this, I'll look it up. And that's a good way to do it. You say, where is that verse that has this word in it? And then you can look it up alphabetically and you can find it. But this goes on to break down the Hebrew and Greek words and give definitions that are coded according to Strong's number. Let me show you here. So we see here, let me get that focus. Sorry, guys. There we go. And so you see Strong's number there. On the left, 6051. I just opened it up to something random. This is cloud. And so without knowing Hebrew, that these are in the Old Testament, you can go back to the Old Testament dictionary there, and you can look it up, what the definition of that word that's translated in this part, cloud, is. And as we use these, we'll talk about some of the pitfalls of it and some things to avoid. Something I call the concordance or dictionary fallacy when we see it. So you've got the concordance that when it's just showing you where things are, you can't get much more objective than that. You go to the dictionary, the concordance, it is making definitions, which usually gives you a variety of options of how things might be translated, and someone really has to be pushing an agenda to skew those much. You go to Bible dictionaries, and you can get to where people might insert some of their opinion a little bit more. Here is Vine's Expository Dictionary, for instance, and these are good sources, and they will take what you can get in seed form in the concordance through the eyes of typically somebody who's a scholar in that language. And when we're talking about dictionaries, this is different than an English dictionary, because what this is doing is keeping in consideration the time period and when the words were used. It's the lexical definition, like what a lexicon a lexicon is attempting to give whenever we look at it. And so Bible dictionaries are nice tools, not the same as English dictionaries. If you look up an angel in an English dictionary, you're going to find something else. In fact, let me just check that out. Hopefully, let me ask Bing, angel definition, right? And angel definition, Merriam-Webster. Here we give a for instance. Let me drag it over here to this window, and we've got it, window 1. So a spiritual being serving as a divine messenger and intermediary, often a special protector of an individual or nation. I've seen worse whenever we look at definitions of angels, and so that one seems well, go Miriam. So I didn't check this out at first. I would agree with them largely here. Usually a white-robed winged, well, oh, hold on. I don't know why they had winged. I would agree with usually a white-robed figure in human form, but here the winged and only saying human instead of man. We'll see that we're going to see that's different. And so you see the subtle things that we can look at and not really recognize that they're off, they're skewed. So the English dictionary is going to go more by what people use that word like in our common vernacular. So we want to look at tools that help us see how the Bible uses those words. As I'm going to get my screens all back where we were. I'm trying to have these screens so I can keep up with the comments. Again, I'm also live on YouTube if you'd like to go look over there. If you're watching me on Facebook, I don't quite know why you would just do that. But if you want to check out the YouTube and make sure it's working, that'd be great for me, because I don't have a good way to do that. So that's the YouTube. Okay, that gave it all weird. Okay, there we go. So we keep on going after you have dictionaries. Well, along with dictionaries, actually, I would put word study books. One that I enjoy that's the New Testament is Ralph Earl's Word Meanings in the New Testament. I like that book a lot. Again, he's a person. He can be subject to error and put his thoughts in there, but that's something to watch. And then you come to commentaries. Commentaries can be great tools, even if you wildly disagree with the person who wrote the commentary. They might have something in there that's helpful to you, but it's good to know what that person's beliefs are about God and the Bible. If you're reading a commentary, for instance, and the person doesn't believe that the Bible is inspired by God, like it says, they don't believe that what we have here is what God wanted us to have, that's going to change how they approach and interpret things a great deal. It'll also make them more likely to include modern cultural things in with their interpretations, or even misuse ancient cultural traditional information, skewing what they believe the context of that is. What I mean is they'll look and they'll say, yeah, the Bible says this, but people in that time didn't do that. Oh, I just hit my microphone. Sorry about that. Hope that didn't make a big sound for you. I saw I guess sort of joke. It's one of those serious jokes, a meme on Facebook where it said archaeologists uncover things for ancient Israel and say, actually, ancient Israel worshipped all kinds of gods. And it said Jeremiah weeping. Yes, they did. Jeremiah knew that they had problem worshiping other gods. Just because they worshipped false gods does not mean that they created the idea of one God, or that the idea of one God came from some other place. They were the people of the one God. He created everything, created them. But some people flip it because they say, well, look at all the archaeological evidence that suggests they were polytheists too. They indeed did have polytheistic practices. That didn't come from God. That was a departure from him. So whenever we're looking at commentaries, that person's view of Scripture and of God is an important thing to recognize, so we can maybe catch if they've skewed it. And what will happen is if you've gone from the Bible to a concordance to a Bible dictionary, by that time you're looking at context. You've developed a very clear idea of what you believe the Bible's teaching. You'll be able to come to these commentaries and you'll find yourself more easily agreeing or disagreeing with them, saying, well, hold on, I saw this and you're saying something different. You got to make your case. Well, why is it you would say that? And sometimes they'll make their case and you'll say, I hadn't considered that. Sometimes they'll make it and you say, I know why that's not true because I saw this verse and that verse. And then you get to past the commentaries, your things like your New York Times bestsellers who just might want to be making some kind of religious splash, opinion pieces, documentaries, and things like that that have, again, a wild variety of veracity in them. So considering that, all that to say, let's get started let's get started now looking at this. I guess we've been started. I apologize. But here we go. Angels in modern times. What I wanted to do is just, I wanted to start by introducing this tool, the Strong's Concordance. If you don't have it, don't be discouraged, because it is a free resource online. You'll be able to find it on your phone. Most phones have apps that have it on it, and so I'll show you how to use that whenever we look at it. But if you, like I showed you, you would start. It's an alphabetical order. There we go. And so I'm going to start with A, and I'm going to look up angel. Let me. It's a big book, so I'm trying to sit it down here a second. I guess I didn't account for that. We'll learn this together. So I'm going to look for angel, not angle, right? I have put that on a slide before. I preached about believing in angles, and that made an interesting point for similarities between angels and angles. But I digress. I'm trying to talk and do the alphabet at the same time. It's not working very well. But here we go. I found it. Angel. So when you come to the entry in Strong's, what you're going to see is it's organized according to the order of the Bible books as we traditionally have them. And what we have here, let me get this to zoom. Sorry for anybody who has... come on, get the words. You had it. Give me 1 second. Let's see if I can shed some light on the subject, and maybe that'll help us out. There we go. I just needed to give it some time. Here we go. Sorry. So, angel. What we see is this word in the Old Testament appears the first time in Genesis 16:7. And so an important thing to keep in mind, we're looking at the English word angel. The English word angel appears the first time in Genesis 16:7. Now that also might be the first time that the Hebrew word appears. We'd have to check that here in a second. But it's in accord with the Hebrew word that Strong labels with 4397. And so what you'll do is you'll write that down. Please, please, please. Even if you're using an electronical version, write that down. And I say that because so many times I've just said, okay, that's the number. And I flip or I move and I go, what was that? And you're going to save yourself a lot of time to write that down. So I'm just going to write angel 4397. Now, what I did is I wrote it on, these are handy, 3M pad, sticky pad, post-it note, whatever. And also a nice one to have is these flags. If you're researching something through several books, these are some of my favorite bookmarkers, and you can just, wherever you leave off, you can put it here across from a paragraph, and you can pick it back up. But these are very nice to have. And also, don't forget that we started perhaps an entry in a notebook that you had for this. And so, like I forgot to get out. There we go. And in that notebook, what you might have done is you might have written the page number you're on. So if other things have happened since last week, I can go back here and I can say Angels in Modern Times. I had that on page 42. And we hadn't really gotten very far on that. And so I'm going to transfer this number over my notebook before we make this other point. So I'm looking at this word, angel, 4397. And another thing that I want to check is, does this happen at other times? And let's give this a second to focus again. I'll see what I can do to make that a little faster sometime. There we go. Nope. And so 4397, and as we glance down through here, sorry if that's messing with you. There we go. As we glance down through here, we'll see in the Old Testament, it's always 4397. Now, here's something to consider. That is not always the case. You're not always going to have the same word translated into that English word each time. And when you come to the New Testament, we're going to see the same thing. The New Testament Greek word corresponds with this number 32. And then you've got the plurals, right? Or possessive, rather, here, plural, as we go on. And those are going to be a little different. We're going to see one difference here that comes up in, I'm trying to look two places at once. There we go. In Psalm 68. Now, when you see the irregularities in that pattern, sometimes you learn something and sometimes it's not particularly helpful. And then here we see another different word here. And I'll just read that to you. Another different word in Luke 20, verse 36. If I start further out and go in slower, sorry about that. So there we go. I'll figure out what I can do about the focus on that a little better. Oh, back here. Okay, there we go. A little less crazy camera angle. Let's see. Hey, Chris said that he cut out on your point on translations, but in before commentaries, I would put thought for thought translations, like the New Living. That's a good point, Chris. When you're looking at a translation that is more thought for thought, is more of a paraphrase, there's more interpretation involved, and those do lean more toward commentaries, and they would be between. You could look at them as being between the two. So that's a good point. Thank you very much for bringing that up. And so what I'll do then, it'll be easy on this one, is I can write the different numbers down for the different words for angel. And that would be the Old Testament. For singular angel would be 4397. The New Testament would be 32. And then for the other two, we've got possessive angels is only in the New Testament. That's 32 again. And then 4397 again for plural angels. But then I've got in Psalm 8:5, there's a different word used. So I'm going to put Psalm 8:5 there since it's only one time, right? The other ones are a lot. And that's number 430. And if it helps you out, that's H for Hebrew, 430, and G for Greek, 32. And then the other different one in the Old Testament that's different than 4397 is 8136. Now, if this is your first time using this, don't be worried. And again, if you don't have it, don't be worried. I'm about to show you some other options that you have. Ignore those numbers. Those are my hotkeys that I hit to change the camera angles. So 40, 40, 40. Don't worry about that. And so the other Old Testament one that's different was Psalm 68:17. And that was 8136. Or H8136. And then in the New Testament, we've got 32 again, and the different one in the New Testament was in Luke, and that was 20, verse 36. and that was number 2465. When you do bigger word studies, it is actually not typical just to have a couple numbers like this. Well, I should say it's quite possible you'd end up with several more numbers, and we'll see a reason why we're looking at this. But what I'll do, and especially because I'm having issues with the camera focusing, is I'll explain this, and I'll show you the faster electronic way to do it. But what we would do, for instance, is we see the Old Testament is 4397. We can go back here, and you say, well, you're going out of order of your most subjective, least subjective. You could read all the verses that have angel in it. That would be a fine thing to do. But what I'm suggesting is you go ahead back to 4397, and that'd be in your Hebrew section of Strong's, and you can see it. A lot of times there'll be a tab or something like this, and it's in numerical order. So you're going back here to 4397. You don't have to know Hebrew to be able to find it. That's one nice thing about Strong's, and many things are coded to Strong's numbers. They'll use Strong's numbers for other things. And so 4397, here we go. I've gone back here, 4390. You don't have to be able to see that. I'm just showing you for instance. And then I'm going to go to 4397 on down, right here. And now I'm going to see the Hebrew spelling of it. I'm going to see the transliteration of it, which is the Hebrew letters moved over into the English alphabet, where we can have an idea of the pronunciation. And then I'm going to see the pronunciation of that. And the pronunciation that I see is Milua. I don't speak Hebrew. Somebody who has done some Hebrew studies might say it's Milua, and that might be it, because I think I see that accent mark at the end. Sorry, I was reading the wrong one. Sorry. I was like, that didn't sound familiar, but I haven't looked at it for a while. Malak. There we go. Malak. From an unused root meaning to dispatch as a deputy, a messenger, specifically of God, i.e. an angel, also a prophet, priest, or teacher, ambassador, angel, king, messenger. Okay, why I wanted to start that is to sort of spoil a little bit, but also when we're reading through these passages that say angel, we can keep in mind the possible definitions. I emphasize possible definitions because this is a warning about what I call the concordance or the dictionary fallacy, and that is, I'm not a Greek or Hebrew scholar, neither are most of you, but even Hebrew and Greek scholars can fall to this fallacy, and that is finding a convenient definition to a Greek or Hebrew word that fits what you want, and then just sticking with that rather than looking at the context that fits it. You can find a corner definition of a word that's not that popular, and you can force it into something and make it look like it says something that it doesn't. It's not going to be as much of a problem here, because what we're going to learn is that word angel is somewhat retrospectively made. It's made looking back, and we have an image that pops into our mind with angel because of our tradition and our media and things like that. That was never meant to be what it was supposed to be. The first time that the words were used, it had this idea of a messenger who was sent, and by whom and what they are, we're going to see, is all based upon the context. Now, often when you see the word translated angel in the Bible, it is talking about a spiritual messenger of God, but that's not always the case. And we have to remember, when we see that word angel, we're seeing a word that we're going to learn can also be translated as messenger, and that's going to be something to look at. And I'm going to show you here in just a second how we can tell the difference. Here we go over to an electronic help. I've introduced e-sword.net, and if you don't have a desktop or a laptop computer that you can get this on, I have something else for you too in just a second. But e-sword.net, you can download eSword. It doesn't cost anything, but there are things that you can buy later for a price. But here's what it looks like after you download it. I'm going to make it a little bigger for us to see. And what it looks scary when you've never seen it before. But you, like anything else, you get used to it. I'm going to show you some things. What we're going to use is this tool to search here, and I'm going to show you two things, because often as we look at searching words, we're looking at searching English words because we're interested in angel, and that's what we did for Strong's Concordance, and it works that way. But I've got a train. Okay. Hopefully you can still hear me over it. What we'll miss if we're just looking at the word angel and any other word study is when the translators choose to translate a different word. And I say translators choose, that's not bad that they do that, because if you've ever taken a second language, you know that there are times where this word wouldn't make sense to translate it that way. The context demands you translate it this other way. And if you're just looking at one word, you might miss other places that the Hebrew or Greek word are used that can give you more context to what that word means. And you'll see that in just a minute. So if we search angel, we're going to get the same. I'm searching angel in the KJV plus. That's the King James Version. Here we go. The King James Version plus these Strong's numbers as you look over here. And so I'm going to look up angel here. And I'm going to go ahead and look up partial match so that it picks up angel, angels, possessive, angels, plural, and King James, and that's going to pick up the same things that I picked up in Strong's Concordance, except it's going to list it relatively, very quickly, right here. And so we can just scroll on, and I can get some real quick numbers, which is really nice, because I can say, oh, in the King James Version, the word angel happens in 289 verses, 303 times. 289 verses. And this is the word angel. Verses 303 times. That means there are some verses that happens more than once. So there we go. That's what happens when I look up the English word. But look at this. It won't be as much of a difference. Well, okay. We said that the word was mostly the same word with just few exceptions, one verse here, one verse there. Look at what happens when I type. So this is Hebrew 3497. We wrote that down earlier. All right? You did write it down if you were following along, right? We wrote that down earlier. Hebrew 3497. I'm going to type in H3497. Now, oh, I'm sorry about that. Wrong thing. H3497 right here. Now, we aren't searching for the English word. We're searching for the Hebrew word. And I've entered that. And 4397. I thought. So you know what 3497 is this Ithnan. It's a name. And it happens one time, so that was fun. 4397. See, I'm even looking at it. I got it wrong. Here we go. This I ought to do better. I'm sorry. I should not use my number pad to type that in. That's where my hotkeys are. So I'll use this top numbers here. Here we go. Now we can look here, and then turn my num lock off. That ought to help. Okay, now we see 196 verses, 213 matches. That's because it's limited to only that Hebrew word, so we don't have every occurrence of angel as we're looking at it. No, here we go. Hold on. Nope. Okay. Technical difficulties. I think I've got it figured out. So we don't have every occurrence of angel. We just have every occurrence of this Hebrew word that can be translated angel. And look at what happens when we scan through. we can see angel, angels, angels. Sorry, there we go. Look at that. And as we go here, we're going to...
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Oh, no thank you, Siri.
Okay.
Looky here, Genesis 32. Let's turn there in our Bibles. We're going to see something interesting. This is where things get fun in a word study. So Genesis 32, we see something that looks different than what we've been seeing, because every other time we've seen angel, but now that we've looked at the Hebrew word and where it happens, then we come across a different word. And we can read this to get some context, and maybe this can help us with our topic later on. So this is when you remember that Esau wanted to kill Jacob because he stole his birthright and got his father's blessing, and they've been separate for about 21 years, and they're about to meet each other, and Jacob's very worried. And in Genesis chapter 32 it says, so Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. So we have some very direct, clear reason in the verse to translate this angels in the way that we might be thinking about it, spiritual messengers of God, because it says the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, this is God's camp. These weren't just any kind of normal messengers, people walking around. It was something that made Jacob recognize this was God's camp, and he called the name of the place Mahanaim. I said Genesis 34 earlier, I think. This is 32. Then Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir. Here's what's cool. When we were looking at this together, and we came to chapter 32, here's angels in verse 1, and I can just click it and bring it right up over here. And so there's angels of God here in verse 1. And then we come down and we see that Jacob sent messengers. And there's the same word, messengers. These are definitely not angels of God like in verse 1. These are people that Jacob sent. And this gives us a biblical illustration of the very solid meaning of this word, angels. So in a core sense, the word angels means a messenger. And the word by itself, as it appears, you can't know messenger of whom, for what, anything about what they look like or who they are without greater context. And that will become what it is that we're searching for as we look. And I want to encourage you to keep on looking at that through the next week. You can read through these verses that have angel in it. I'm going to look up the New Testament word, and that is G32 here. And when we go back and see its occurrences, we see that there are 228 times and 233 matches. You already have seen then that we're off in our math just by the English to the Hebrew and Greek occurrences. In English, the word angel came up 303 total times. Here, whenever we look at, again, I should have written this down, 4397, there is 213 matches. And then when you look in Greek, G32, we have the 233 matches, and that's 446 times. We have then over 133 times more that the Hebrew and Greek words happen. And if you didn't expect to see messenger sometime, then what this will tell you is, hold on, it's translated angel 303 times, but there are 140 some times it's translated something else. And that can give you something to look for to see what that would be. And so then you can look through this list, and you could read these verses, and that's nice about the verse previews here as we look. But here you go, you come pretty quickly to Matthew 11. And Matthew 11, we see, "For this is he of whom it is written, Behold, I send my messenger before thy face." Oh, Matthew 11. Who are we talking about when we look in Matthew 11:7? "As they departed, Jesus began to say unto the multitudes concerning John." John, if you want to blow people's mind, John is called an angel. And then that shows us, wait, every time we see the word angel, it doesn't necessarily mean what we think of it as meaning. Even more, if we're thinking Hollywood's version of angels, we find that's very different. What I do like lately, there's been this popularized idea of it would be terrifying to give a biblically accurate picture of an angel. If a biblically accurate angel would appear to you, you'd be terrified. And I get what they mean, some of the representations of those. And then other times, we would be surprised at what we see if they're not these terrifying looking creatures. Sometimes they're pretty normal looking men, and sometimes they're men who, in and of themselves, because of their glorious presence, are scary. To full grown men, they make them pass out, or maybe even arguably die, and they resurrect them again, depending on what that is. But it's neat because here we've done this word study. You can already do a lesson that John the Baptist was a messenger, and a messenger of God, but he was a human messenger of God. And in that regard, that word for angel is used, and we understand already that there's that disparity between how it's commonly pictured and what the Bible says. What I've got over here is Chris says, then I haven't looked at the Hebrew word for this, but you have, for example, in Genesis 18:19, where the men that visited Abraham and Sodom were angels, obvious by this context. Yes, and it's interesting when we go look at, we can go ahead and look at that, Genesis 18 through 19. Let's bring that chapter up, and when we look at the beginning of that chapter, we see that the Lord appears to Abraham in the plains of Mamre as he sits at the tent door in the heat of the day, and he lifted up his eyes, Abraham, and lo, there were three men. So right now we just have context clues from here and here, three men, and so they're talked about that way, if I'm not mistaken, throughout this exchange. But then they get the food for him, they wait for it, and they tell him about how Sarah's going to have a baby, and that she'll bear a child, and they say, is anything too hard for the Lord? And so you continue on through the chapter, and let me get down here. And the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, because of their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which has come to me. And verse 22, and the men turned their faces from thence and went towards Sodom, but Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And so as we're looking at this, we actually are getting to another question. Angel, Lord, Lord, angels, as we're examining it. But we haven't seen them called angels just yet. But whenever we continue, we're going to see this difference. If I'm not mistaken, yes, you go back into Genesis 19, and there came two angels to Sodom. Whenever we consider that all together, there were three together. Was that an early? Someone might say, well, three. We see three. We think of a manifestation of the Trinity. But then we see the two go here, or these two who departed from the one stays and talks to Abraham. Was this the Lord? And so that's a whole study. But we do see the angels come up, and that is the same word used for angels throughout the rest of the Old Testament, save for that one exception, or the two exceptions we see in Psalms. It's been about an hour. We'll look at the exceptions real quick and see if anything comes out of them. I'm not looking at this any in between because I want to discover or rediscover some things with you. And this is one of those things that I don't know. I want to look at that different. Psalm 8 has a different word there, and I want to see what that is and if that helps me with anything. Also, a warning while we're looking at this different word. Whatever we might discover, that might be really amazing, but it's a one-time thing. I need to be careful I don't try to apply that where it doesn't fit everywhere else I might see the word angel happen. And say, well, there's this one time this other word's used, and it might be because this is a different word. Let's look at what it comes from. So Psalm 8:5. I'm going to look at it in my Bible, but I'll go ahead and bring it up here just in case you're following along like this. So Psalm 8:5. I'm reading from the New King James Version. This is the King James. For you have made him a little lower than the angels, and you have crowned him with glory and honor. I do indeed find that interesting, but I don't know enough yet to see what's going on. This is going to be used in the book of Hebrews, talking about the humility of Jesus. Shows angels are greater than people and things like that. And so you made them a little lower than the angels. I wonder what's different about this word. And again, if you're using Strong's Concordance, here's a nice thing about it. I can just go here to this verse. You made them a little lower than the angels. And the word, again, we found for it, it's not this one. It's not 4480. When we looked in Strong's, what we saw is it's this word, 4300. Okay, Elohim. So that there we go. You made him a little lower than, and this is a word that you will find translated. If it's not about God, it's about little g gods, Elohim. This can bring us down a whole interesting rabbit hole regarding this, because this is going to be quoted again in the New Testament, and it's going to be quoted in a context, right, where it just showed that Jesus is greater than angels, and so why is it they would translate it that way? I'm going to check real quick to see in the Apostolic Polyglot that has here a Greek Old Testament. Let me look at it there. What it makes me want to see is angels. Okay, so whenever we're looking at the Greek Old Testament, the translators in the time of the Septuagint translated this word Elohim as angels. So there, we need to recognize there's some interpretation there, but also the way it's applied fits that, and we're seeing then that there's some kind of synonymous usage of this. I'm being careful how I talk about it. It's the first time I've seen it just like that, but like I said, be careful not applying this to everything. One, I wouldn't apply this and say all angels, if they're bad angels, are the false gods. I don't know that we could accurately make that. I believe I've seen that asserted places, and I might have just forgotten that they alluded to this verse, because if I'm not mistaken, if we look at this word, or it might just be El, we will see that people are called gods too, depending on that usage. I'm going to go look while this is thinking here. I'm going to go ahead and look in John where I'm thinking. Okay, so I'm looking in John, chapter 10 and verse 34, because that's where he quotes Psalm 82. And when I'm looking down through here, okay, by the way, 2,600 matches for Elohim. So we're not going to be trying to search that read that exhaustively together, but I did want to. What I'll do is I'll just skip straight to Psalm 64, because Jesus, in defending himself and referring to himself as the Son of God, he quotes Psalm 82. There we go. And in Psalm 82, verse 6, there we go. Okay, Elohim. So if we did a little bit of a rabbit hole, but there's that one time where Elohim, gods, is translated angels instead of gods, and then here's a time where God is talking in the psalm. Would be an interesting broader study, and he's saying that his people essentially are princes. This could be abused, and there are man-made religions that would say, "Oh, we're gods, and someday we'll be little gods of our own creation." And this may be one place that they would go. But in and of itself, it can just mean great, mighty, and therefore we could look at it that way. Why is it that Jesus would say it that way? My guess, as we're looking at it, is that he's quoting the Septuagint, and there we go. Yes, when you look in the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, he uses the word here theos, the Greek word for gods, and so the Septuagint, when you go to it, uses that, and Jesus is quoting the Septuagint, and what he's telling them is, you didn't get really upset when this verse that you use happens so often regarding other people, but also he was subtly making the point that they were onto something too. That's another topic. But look at occurrences of the word angel. When we get back together next week, we'll look at some patterns. We'll distinguish between the spiritual messengers and the earthly messengers. We'll look at characteristics that we see about them. And as we're doing that, we'll be developing the biblical picture of angels, and we'll see what that has to do with modern times if we get any hints for that. So thank you so much for coming with me. It's been a fun time, and I certainly hope that you'll join me again. Let me know if there's anything I can do to make it better, aside from maybe get better at my camera work. I'll see what I can do to make that focus faster. But thank you all for a great day, and keep studying.